Relinquishing the authority as a husband to allow your wife to go and preach or pastor, it's not a weakness, it's actually a sign of spiritual maturity. Because who am I to not allow my wife to go and pastor? If God has called you to do that, then you need to follow what God has called her to do.
Well, Dr. Duran, it's so good to have you. This is probably the most exciting interviews and one of my favorite ones that I'm doing.
Well, I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, you are the fourth generations of the Assemblies of God minister.
Yes.
Fourth or fifth, and you went to 2 Assemblies of God schools.
It's correct. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was a minister, and my grandfather and my father and probably 30 people in my family are ordained Assemblies of God ministers. I also went to Southwestern and graduated from AGTS as well.
Wow, what a legacy. You are the true product of the AG. That is amazing. Now, I've known you for the last 17 years in various capacities. Probably one of my favorite roles is that you as my husband.
Yes.
So this is why this interview is so exciting to me personally, but I know that this will benefit so many ministers around the world, and you are very important as a male champion, and you do so well. I almost feel like you need to have a cohort, like teaching men how to champion women, because you do that exceptionally well.
That's my honor.
Oh, thank you. So you're here. But you've begun some new ministry role as a pastor's husband. Now, that's kind of unique. How did you end up being that situation?
Well, yes. In fact, we just went to, if you remember, we went to a banquet the other day, and I got a little thing, my little ID badge that said pastor's spouse. So I thought that was very interesting. I keep that in my memory box. So this is a little bit of the story. I've been doing ministry for maybe 17, 18 years, and I got to a point as a pastor where I thought, I'm getting burnt out. Ministry is I'm probably going to be hindering the ministry if I stay in it full time rather than being a benefit to it. And I didn't want to burn out. I didn't want to be a pastor that was disgruntled or anything like that, but I knew that there was a change coming. And at the same time, you as my wife, were feeling the call to a more permanent pastoral role. At that time, I was the senior pastor, the founder of our church, and you were an associate pastor, but of course you were working full-time. Then the opportunity came for me to teach at a school. And it was really a prayer for me saying, Lord, I love ministry, but I'm afraid I'm getting stressed out over it. I need a change, and if there's an opportunity to come that I could perhaps take that role, I would take it. And at the same time, you were praying if there was an opportunity for you to increase your role as a pastor. And so God opened up a door for me to teach full-time as a Bible teacher. And that's when we started thinking about switching roles. And the Lord opened up the opportunity for our lead pastors of our church network and our board to unanimously agree to have you as our senior pastor. Our church people thought it was a great thing for both of us. And so what we basically did is we swapped roles. You became the lead pastor, and I became the co-lead pastor.
And that was a journey. It didn't happen overnight, and we slowly walked that journey together. And even how you championed me as a lead pastor today, it wasn't like, okay, I'm getting burnt out, you take over the baton today, or tomorrow. It was kind of the process. You walk with me as co-lead pastor, actually, for 1 year, between that transitional time before I became a fully instated as a lead pastor. That was a very important season, that 1 year of the gap year where we transitioned. Then I became a lead pastor.
Well, we even knew a couple years ahead of time that I couldn't keep on the pace that I was going. And so when I was the lead pastor, you were the associate pastor. About a year into it, we decided, let's elevate your role and we would become co-pastors. Yes. And one of the main reasons for that was doors were not opening up for you. When you would go and tell them I'm the associate pastor of a church, that sometimes does not have the same effect as you saying I'm a lead pastor. Yes. And we saw that, and we did that with intentionality, because when you would go and tell somebody, somewhere in the community, something else, you wanted to get involved, they're like, well, why don't you just refer us to your lead pastor? Yeah. and that's not what we were wanting. So for 1 year, we elevated you to co-lead pastor. And then when the opportunity came, and this was a door that opened up that only God could open for me to do the full-time teaching and you to stop your work and then go full-time at our church. It was really God ordained. Now that time, you didn't even have to put the co-lead pastor anymore. You were the lead pastor, and I am the co-lead pastor. But the difference is, you get to be involved in all the different things in the community where I have to be at work, and you are able to be the face of our church.
Yeah, and I did feel the tangible difference when I present myself as a lead pastor, networking with people. There is a significant difference, but you champion it. And part of that championing is actually stepping down, recognizing that you were getting burnt out. And a lot of male leaders will not do that. Even though they feel burnt out, it takes a lot of courage and faith for them to say, you know what, I think this is my limit, but I do see a future, even to pass the baton to your spouse, and that's a huge trust and faithfulness in your part. So,
well, I believe in the flesh it was difficult because there is this thing in the Hispanic culture that machismo, like I'm in control and I want to be the leader. But I also knew that God had called you. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later, about how God called you in Korea. But I also knew that you were going to do a great job, and you have walked alongside me the whole time with the same people that we are meeting and that we are working with in our community. And those connections, they've already seen you, they knew who you were, so that transition was fairly easy in certain aspects.
And our story is quite unique because we both are ordained pastors, and for some reason, sometimes it's easy to pass the baton back and forth. But a lot of the pastors' husbands out there, that may be tuning into our podcast and listening, it's not their role. They're not maybe credentialed. They're not called to the church ministry, pulpit ministry type of thing. But I think the challenges are similar, as a husband to a pastor. So it's kind of tell us about it as you walk this journey for a couple of years now as a pastor's spouse, pastor's husband. What are some of the unique challenges that you're experiencing?
One of the main uniquenesses of this is where I had control over the church and I was the leader. Now I have to hand that baton off to you. And there's times where your decision making may be different than mine. And so in my heart, I really want to try something different, or I want to go in a different direction. But I have to remember I'm no longer the lead pastor. You're the lead pastor. And so for a pastor's husband, maybe some of the things they may question what the wife, the pastor, is doing at the church. But I also understand that you were fully called by God to be the pastor of the church. When I relinquished my authority over the church as the lead pastor and took a secondary role as a co-lead pastor, I had to recognize that you were now given the baton by God and our church to lead us. And so I wanted to be able to champion that. And I have to admit, though, Pastor Saehee, that there's been times when you made decisions I disagreed with. They actually came out better than I expected, and they were much better than I would have done. And so, and those are the times where God says, see, you just got to trust your pastor.
Thank you for making it public, too. That's important for us to hear that. We talked about the challenges. What are some benefits? What are some of the benefits of being pastors' husbands?
Benefits of being a pastor's husband, I think they would be identical as that of a pastor's wife. The only difference is the gender.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I have to admit, one of my weaknesses in ministry is I'm not very good with confronting or having conflicts. So when there's somebody in the church that I need to confront about, that always was one of my, not my brightest moments. However, you are able to do that with such grace and peace. And when it comes from you, I think people take it a lot better than when it comes from me. Because I try to do my very best to discipline and counsel. But maybe because I am a man, if it comes to a female person, it may be a little bit difficult to take. Now, when it comes from you, I think you have a more gentle approach. And in that aspect, you're much better in that role for me.
Wow. Well, thank you for saying that. And I think that's encouraging for other female leaders that our femaleness is not a weakness, but it could actually be the strength.
Could absolutely be a strength if it's used correctly and wisely. And as you mature in your walk with the Lord, God gives you the ability to bring wisdom to people. I've seen you do a lot of counseling with people. And there's times where you were very soft and gentle with certain people when you needed to be because that person needed it. But then you are very strong and forward with people that need to hear that, especially with men. There's times where you have to just say it as it is to the men.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of you because you are able to recognize when to be strong and when to have a more gentle approach.
Well, I think part of that is because of your voice. I bring that to you as my mentor, and I go through a situation like I don't know how to deal with it, like because I do want to confront situation, but I don't want to be an aggressive, that aggressive woman, So you coach me through that, and I think for every female leader, they either have it will be a blessing to have someone like you who can coach you, whether it is a spouse or non-spouse, a mentor and champion who can coach them through how to talk through that and even stand firm in difficult situations. So thank you for doing that for me personally, but I think our relationship would inspire something for our listeners and viewers. Yeah.
One of the things that I really appreciate about what you have done is you've been taking the proactive role as finding male mentors to guide you. I mean, just the other day we got together with Dr. George Wood to get some insight from him, and it was valuable to me as well. Sometimes, even as a male lead pastor, I would definitely go to older male pastors as well to glean from them. And so you're doing the exact same thing, as well as trying to glean information from female lead pastors.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are doing that shows me that you want to be the very best leader you can be. And I would probably encourage anybody that's listening, especially female pastors, ministers, to do the same thing, to find people that they can trust, to gain some wisdom from them, both male and female.
Yeah, that's excellent, because in one of our Grow Together podcast episode, we talked about just that, finding allies and how to be proactive in that. And so here's a true example of it. Yeah, so that's excellent. Well, here's my final questions. I know that in the Assemblies of God, the credentialed women are nearing 30%. And that is more than half of it since 1999, and that's huge. I believe that number is going to continue to grow, which means there are probably going to be more pastors' husbands. So as someone who's already walking this journey as a pastor husband, what kind of wisdom would you like to share for our future pastors' husbands?
Okay. As a male, you have to first understand that your wife has been called to ministry. It's not something that came from her mind or your education or your thoughts. God has called her to ministry. I remember about 16 years ago in our first year of marriage, we just had a prayer service with some friends of ours. And you're a young Christian, you didn't know anything about being a minister, and especially when we're living in South Korea, you don't see any female lead pastors. But I remember very sheepishly you said, I feel like I'm called to be a pastor. Now, that could have only come from the Lord. That wasn't something that you made up. Now, when you told me that, I have to say, okay, then this is definitely from God. And it may have taken a long time for you to reach being a lead pastor, but I do believe it was a call from God. So relinquishing the authority as a husband to allow your wife to go and preach or pastor, it's not a weakness, it's actually a sign of spiritual maturity. Because who am I to not allow my wife to go and pastor? If God has called you to do that, then you need to follow what God has called her to do. And also in your heart, you should also make sure that that's also what she's called to. And I mean, from the very moment you told me that, I knew it, and I see it clearly even now today.
Well, thank you so much. I know that when God called me to ministry, I was questioning it, but you affirmed it. And I think that's something our future pastors' husbands can also take away with, is that their role in affirmation, knowing that, yes, you are called. You didn't call yourself.
And I also have to, make a note of reference too, that here in the Assemblies of God, yet we do have 25% of our credentialed ministers are female. Not as many of them are lead pastors. But probably that's still because we still have problems with males not opening up the doors and not championing women to do that. I believe and I hope that there will be a shift in the culture because we see so many women that are called to ministry. Who are we to stand in the way of what God has called? If God has called people to be a youth pastor, associate pastor, lead pastor, then they should have the ability to do that. And so maybe sometimes the old boys club may get in the way, but that may soon dissolve into a place where females can freely utilize their spiritual giftings and callings. And I would love to see more husbands and wives like us pastor together. But even if your husband is not called to ministry, and you are, I would say continue to move forward. And I pray that that husband will also recognize the calling on their life.
Wow, that is so powerful. And you're living that. You're living that out, and you're an example of many, you know, like they're growing and you get to spearhead it. And so I'm so thankful for your voice and your input and wisdom you shared with me over the past 17 years. Sometimes I feel like in my immature state of mind and spirituality, you have pulled me through and you affirmed me even when I wanted to quit. I hope that every female minister will have a husband like you or another male champion like you. I think the world will be so different and church will be stronger because we're leading side by side. Thank you so much for your voice. And
it's my pleasure.
I tell this to every interviewee that I interview, but I love you and I really love you. I think I'm allowed to say this on this episode.
I love you too.
Yeah, well, thank you and God bless you, Pastor Damon.
God bless you too.